So these figures are absurdly expensive at 168,300 yen and 147,400 yen respectively. And in this video, we're going to assert that anyone that buys this line is getting ripped off by FuRyu. And at a glance, it's really easy to explain why. Wait. Actually, no, it's not easy to explain because here in the West, there's next to no information about this line, and the narrative that I see reposted on Reddit over and over and over again is completely wrong. It seems like only a few individuals really know about these figures. Now, that's not a jab at our Reddit friends or anyone else that has spread the same misinformation, because what they say is completely logical, and I'll get back to that at a later point in this video. Now, this will be an in-depth discussion on this topic and not some basic-ass commentary of, oh, well, any figure this price is surely a scam, or anyone that spends this much money deserves to be scammed. No, nothing like that. These are Halo-level products with a certain perceived value to them that people are willing to pay, myself included. I paid full MSRP for this kurumi here, and even damaged and used, I still paid $700 for the rim here. But there's nothing like these on the market. And before I bought my very first Yoshitoku, there was next to no information about these online. The price makes these a very niche product, and of people that are able to get it in that niche, only a few of those are content creators, and an even smaller amount of those do anything beyond a basic unboxing. In fact, I think our video is the very first in-depth look at one that I've seen for English-speaking audiences, especially when we go into detail about is this pattern printed versus embroidered. Every detail about this was new to us, having never really had a meaningful impression of one prior to owning it. And that is a goal of our channel. We want you to experience as much of these figures as possible without having to be around it, because in the West, that can be really difficult. This is going to be its own self-contained video, so you do not need to go out and watch this review prior to finishing this. Though if you are interested in these figures, I highly recommend the in-depth look that we have of this. But I am going to reference part of that video where we start to talk about value. Having no meaningful impression of these or having anything to compare them to, it was difficult to ascertain what the value of this really is. And that's something I hope to rectify here in this video. Because we went to Tokyo and brought home the crucial missing piece of this puzzle, which I will reveal to you later on in this video. For those of you new to this channel, I'm Senpai, and along with my Kohai, we're known for doing in-depth anime figure reviews. If that's something that interests you, please check out our channel and consider subscribing. This is going to be a long discussion because we have a lot to break down, so let's dive right in. First off, for those not in the know, these figures are a collaboration between two parties, NEX and Yoshitoku. NEX is responsible for the PVC portion of these, and NEX is a subsidiary of FuRyu. You can consider them to be the luxury lineup versus like the regular prize figure lineup. And Yoshitoku is responsible for the cloth kimono aspect of these, and that's what makes these so special. There's no other figures like them on the market, and in fact, we shouldn't even call them figures, we should call them dolls, also something I'll get to at a later point in this video. Knowing this, anytime one of these figures gets posted to Reddit, a pretty predictable sequence of events happens, and it goes something like this. The figure gets posted, along with its astronomical price tag, which brings in an influx of comments that are like, why so expensive? Holy crap, that price tag. That's beautiful, but whoa, that price. Or you get kind of the clever people coming in and being like, here comes a string of comments asking about price, hardy har har. And but they don't really explain why it ends up being so expensive. So that's the common initial reaction to that post. But before we move on to the typical response, let's go ahead and break this down. Why does it seem so expensive? Well, if you've been in the scene for a while, you'll recognize that most 1/4 scale figures are bunnies. This one here is Chiyo from Anenaru Mono, and I bought her at full retail price from Amiyami for 27,300 yen, and the MSRP listed on my figure collection is 30,000 yen. A few years ago, bunny figures tended to be around the 25,000-ish range, but recently after COVID, we've seen them go up to the mid 30,000 yen range and some IPs even as high as 40,000 yen. though those do not seem to be selling well, and they're quickly discounted to put on sale to be back in the low 30,000s, with some of them even going down into the 20s. But all this to say, I'm pretty confident in that most people would expect a bunny to be around 30,000 yen, and that's the number I'm going to use for this discussion. So let's quickly compare. At their core, these are essentially 1/4 scale bunny figures without the clothing, right? So these have nude forms underneath. So these are theoretically easier to produce than the bunny figures you see here because it requires a lot less tooling since you aren't doing the clothes, the extra paint, the fishnets, right? There are more steps involved in producing this final bunny form versus this that gets wrapped in a cloth kimono. So if a bunny is worth 30,000 yen and the bunny is more complex than the PVC elements in these figures, albeit these are a lower production quantity, I think it's fair to call it a wash and say that these have, on the surface, a perceived value of 30,000 yen for the PVC 1/4 element. I think that's a fair statement. And if we perceive these 1/4 scale elements to be worth around that 30,000 yen mark, then we're left wondering what is taking up that 140,000 yen price tag, right? Where is that coming from? And that's the general logic that people apply to these figures when they see them. So if the most copied and pasted reaction is, why is this so expensive? Well, then the most copied and pasted response goes something like this. It's expensive because this is a real cloth kimono made by Yoshitoku, who is a famous kimono company in Japan and even makes kimonos for the imperial family. That is the copied and pasted response that I see all the time on Reddit. And that's where the logic comes in that I talked about in the beginning of this video. What makes these figures different is the cloth kimono. And if we're used to seeing the PVC 1/4 be around 30,000 yen, it's logical to assert that the cloth kimono must be what cost the additional 140,000 yen. And that's a very logical conclusion and one that we do see pasted over and over. But it's wrong. And it's wrong in two ways, one of which being a little more important to this discussion. But the manufacturing of kimonos, at least in the sense that they're implying, is wrong. And the other is that Yoshitoku is responsible for the 140,000 yen upcharge that I will assert is wrong. But let's go ahead and get the history out of the way since that's the easy part. The history I'm going to talk about is taken directly from Yoshitoku's own website since they offer their own biography and even a timeline of important events. I mention this because Yoshitoku's own statement about their company is that they are a doll manufacturer. They make dolls, and Yoshitoku frequently refers to them as toys, even though they're only toys in the same sense that anime figures are toys. They're collectibles, and it's very apropos to call Yoshitoku a luxury doll manufacturer. They are, in fact, Tokyo's oldest doll manufacturer and have been around since 1711, which is insane. So to say they're prestigious is an understatement. They started out by making Hina dolls, which is still what they are most famous for to this day. They're literally just like Wakana Gojo from My Dress Up Darling, right? His family makes Hina dolls, and so too does Gojo aspire to. They're just like that. Now, I'm not going to get into the history of Hina dolls. Just note that you typically see them in relation to the seasonal festival of Hina Matsuri. And when you see them, you normally see them on a tiered staircase. This is supposed to represent a wedding, and at the top is the Emperor and Empress of Japan, and the rest of the people are in their court. So yes, they make kimonos for the royal family, if the royal family were dolls. I also see it pretty typically stated that they're the sole provider of dolls for the imperial family, or they make dolls for the imperial family. As far as I can tell in my research, they just make dolls of the imperial family. I think the royal family is just buying dolls like anybody else, right? The royal family's rich and you're going to buy the most prestigious thing on the market. And at that level, you probably are rich enough too to commission whatever you're looking for. At the very least, if they are the sole provider of dolls, Yoshitoku didn't see that as a big enough point to put on their timeline of events. But everything I've said so far basically amounts to semantics, right? But I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what Yoshitoku does because that directly affects the cost of things. If they were a kimono manufacturer and they have to scale it down for a doll, that's going to be priced differently than a company that deals with things of this size frequently. So let's transition to why we are here. What about price? Is this kimono really worth 140,000 yen? Yoshitoku is famous for their Hina dolls, and Hina dolls are typically sold with an entire scene. At minimum, there's going to be 2 of them. It's going to be the Emperor and the Empress, but they might also be with their entire court. And the prices are pretty astronomical, and they tend to start in the $2,000 range and go up even into the 5 digits. The astute of you might notice that Hina dolls do not really look like these, right? Hina dolls are sitting down for starters, and the Empress who is wearing a kimono isn't a kimono in this traditional sense. Her garb is a royal kimono called a junihitoe, which is basically a multi-layered kimono of many different colors. So it's quite different from the dolls that you see beside me. But Yoshitoku does make other dolls, and they make a lot of them actually, including other things such as toys like stuffed animals, backpacks, and even small suits of armor. These collaborations are related to Oyama dolls, which is why we need to call these dolls instead of figures. But instead of the white porcelain Japanese woman, we're greeted with our familiar character. The name comes from the puppeteer and builder that made them famous. Back in the day, they were typically of kabuki theater, where men actually dressed as women and wore all white paint, but it also expanded to artwork. And nowadays, it just encompasses the traditional Japanese woman, and that's the definition that Yoshitoku uses on their own website for an Oyama doll. So knowing these are Oyama dolls and not Hina dolls, how expensive are they? And this is something we tried to address in our original review video. We just didn't have enough information to do so. But let's go ahead and take a look at what the current listings are for Oyama dolls on Yoshitoku's website. As you can see here, the prices are all over the place, and this is what we ran into in the video. The 20,000 ones, if we click on and look at the description, are of a different scale. They're smaller, so we can eliminate those. And from this point, the pictures and descriptions are terrible. Some of the listings are old and only show you tiny pictures. Newer listings that have been added do show you large pictures, but don't tell you anything about the special fabrics used or anything like that. If we look at those that are 70,000 yen and up, it seems clear that it's some kind of different fabric being used. They seem to use a lot of embroidery techniques. It's a thicker, though maybe softer looking fabric, so we can assume there's probably some kind of heritage there that makes them so expensive. So it appears that these dolls are in the same caliber of the Oyama dolls in the 30,000 yen range. But how can we judge this? Just like in the review video, we're kind of stuck now. The pictures are not enough to judge and say that these are exact copies or this is what they are. And we're back to just having not enough information to make any statement of value. Well, this is what this entire video has been leading up to. You see, we went to Tokyo and went to Yoshitoku's headquarters and flagship store and bought a real Oyama doll just so we can compare. We're going to do an in-depth look at the similarities, the differences, the price I paid, and the production so we can ascertain and assign a value to the kimono that you see here. So, without further ado, say hello to our Oyama doll. Isn't she lovely? Real fast, this was made possible by a donation by my little sister. In fact, after hearing me talk about the video I wanted to make, she fronted half the cost of this figure so we can present it to you all today. So this is a very special shout out to her for making this possible. So where do we even start from here? First off, Even though I have Rim, I'm not going to use her in this comparison because we didn't do an in-depth review on her because I bought her used and damaged. So I'm going to rearrange this and we're only going to compare her to Kurumi. So with this rearranged, let's go ahead and look at the kind of big picture here. And to make this discussion easier, I'm going to call this Oyama doll Oyami. So say hello to Oyami. First off, buying this doll fully confirms that these collaborations are indeed based off of an Oyama doll. Not only are they the same scale, this is all the same materials used. Every fabric we talked about in the detailed discussion video, we see here and then some. On Kurumi here, we were able to identify 4 different types of fabrics used. And on Oyami here, I can identify 7 different types of fabrics that are used. Looking at both designs, we see the same print work. So on this sleeve of Kurumi, the maze that you see in those detailings are all printed. For Oyami, on this sleeve here, that's exactly what we see. The pattern in the background is actually woven in, but all of these details are printed. And we see that same gold kind of print line work that goes across all this to make it very vibrant. So we have identical materials here. For Kurumi, on her obi, we see embroidered work. And on Oyami, we actually have embroidered work in multiple places. So we have it also too on her obi, but then we also see it here on these sleeves. If you look closely, Oyami is actually wearing 2 different kimonos. So she's actually wearing this red one here on the outside and has let down a sleeve, revealing the inner sleeve of her white kimono that she's wearing. So although it looks kind of white on this side, if you turn it around, you can see the red kimono that she's actually wearing on the outside. So not only do we see embroidered work on Oyami, on her obi, just like Kurumi, all of this sleeve work that you see, so all of this fabric and print here, which goes on her sleeves, and all the way down the back, that's all embroidered work. In terms of real rope, we see that the obijime is done with real rope on Kurumi. And then Oyami here has 3 different kinds of rope. She has rope here in her headdress, which is the same rope used here on the samurai helm or kabuto. She has a different set that's up here on the back of her hair, as well as her obijime being of a much larger, thicker rope. In terms of included accessories, for Kurumi we've got her headdress here with her kamikazari up top, and then we have her guns. For Oyami, we have a very elaborate headdress and the samurai helm. Let's move on to the bases because they are dramatically different. For Kurumi, we have the cheapest base in the world, and you can even see the support structure through the top. And the way she's mounted on plastic pegs, and this is just a squared off shape. For Oyami, it already looks significantly better because at least it's a gloss black finish, and this is on a particle board. So it's like a lacquered finish on top of a particle board, and it's beveled on the edges. The bottom has a nice felt coating here so you don't scratch anything when you set her down. And I've cut this open to reveal that she's mounted with screws. So there are threads through her legs, and then she's bolted here at the bottom. Significantly more secure and looks significantly more premium than what NEX has done with Kurumi. Moving on to the signs, it's basically the exact same story. For NEX here, we have this gloss one that looks really good, but this plastic is very cheap. And this is the kind that will scratch if you just rub it with a slightly abrasive cloth. And Oyami over here, hers is made out of wood, which definitely gives it a more premium feel. So here's the part you've been waiting for, and I'm going to bring back Rim to do so. I think that just by looking at them from afar, right, when you compare Oyami here to Rim and Kurumi, that anyone looking at these will say that Oyami is more complex. Right, there's literally more to her. Not only does she have more fabric because she's basically wearing 2 kimonos, so she has multiple sleeves, she has more embroidery work, and her accessories are very impressive. So what did Oyami cost me? Because we do not see her on the website. I paid full MSRP, and I paid 39,600 yen. And keep in mind, that's for the entirety of Oyami. That's for her kimono. That's for the figure itself. That's for her accessories. That's for the base. That's for the stand. And that 39,600 yen mark, which I'll just start saying 40,000 yen, price point is enough for Yoshitoku to be profitable. And that's where this discussion gets really interesting. See, we know the perceived value of a 1/4 scale figure. And as far as we can tell online, maybe this kimono was more akin to the 30,000, 40,000 yen range. But now that we have that 40,000 yen Oyama doll in front of us, we can definitively say that this is the same series, and this is a more complex version of what we see here from the NEX Yoshitoku collabs. So here's how I see it. Let me take away Rim for a second and replace her with Chio. We see 1/4 scale figures at the 30,000 yen price point that is profitable for companies, albeit these are mass produced. We're seeing this Oyama doll that has a more complex kimono, and of course is the entirety of this doll, for 40,000 yen, and that these two together would roughly mean that Kurumi is worth 70,000 yen, but something's not right. We're getting less when we do this conversion, but Kurumi also cost 170,000 yen. That's over 100,000 yen more than the perceived value that we see here. And we need to answer the question of why. Now, the first thing we have to do is talk about production quantity, because this whole phenomenon can be explained away in 2 seconds if there's 100,000 Oyamis produced and only 1,000 Kurumis. As you scale up production, the cost of each unit goes down. As you do low quantities of production, each unit cost is significantly higher, and that could explain away that 100,000 yen that we see here. And so this is where things get tricky. This was going to be extremely hard to hunt down, right? There's next to no information on these, and no companies talk about like the production quantities of these figures. And so I'd have to be lucky enough to, I don't know, email FuRyu and hope that they'll tell me the number here. And then vice versa, you know, I've got to make sure that Yoshitoku tells me the production quantity for here, so at least we can make some kind of judgment on the production quantities to see if that can explain away that 100,000 yen. So this could have been an impossible challenge, right? But I was able to ask the manager at Yoshitoku. And maybe if he gave us kind of a low figure, we can just kind of use some estimations, like if this was 1,000 of her, maybe we can say there's maybe 1,000 of these, so maybe it's a wash, and maybe we still can't explain away that 100,000 yen. But what the manager told me about Oyami changes this entire dichotomy. In fact, what he told me means that it doesn't even matter how many Kurumis are produced. You see, Oyami is made to order. The store only had one because they have to order her. In fact, this is why the website says if you place an order for an Oyama doll, it takes 7 to 10 days to ship. They're made to order, which is the most expensive form of production there is. The least wasteful, but the most expensive. This means that Yoshitoku is profitable hand making these to order at 40,000 yen. And I'm not sure I actually stressed that in the video yet. These are handmade. That is a very expensive process to do. Employees touch each one of these units to make the kimonos you see here. So now, it doesn't really matter how many of these are produced, because no matter what, FuRyu is approaching Yoshitoku and buying in some bulk quantity. And we know this because of pre-orders. If you look at Amiyami and such, these are not tentative pre-orders. They're pre-orders. So there is some set amount that they know they're going to produce and are giving out to companies for pre-order purposes. But even if it was a tentative pre-order, they're still going to get some kind of quantity figured out and then negotiated with Yoshitoku. And because they're negotiating a quantity, there's always room for negotiating discounts and unit discounts because it's a much larger volume. So we know Yoshitoku is capable of handling low production quantities because they're made to order. So is the problem on FuRyu's end, right? Maybe they really just can't scale down a 1/4 figure in terms of production. Maybe this 1/4 scale figure at a low production quantity costs them 130,000 yen to make, and that makes up that additional 170,000 yen total if we value the kimono at 40,000 yen. But we know that's bullshit, because FuRyu, one, knows high production because they do prize figures, and they have examples of production at low quantities. See, they make one of my dream figures, which is a 1/2 scale Oshino Shinobu. This thing is absolutely enormous. This was a limited release and came in at 174,000 yen, albeit this was back in 2021. But we know with this price that FuRyu is capable of doing low production quantities of something at a seemingly reasonable price. Again, that's a 1/2 scale with a ton of material, lots of tooling, yet still listed at the same price as this kurumi we see here. So there's no way that the tooling just for this 1/4 somehow magically exceeds or even gets near that 1/2 scale Shinobu. So the way I see it, 30,000 yen is still very generous for what we see here, especially given the fact that it requires less tooling because it's less complicated. Again, it's basically a nude form underneath here. There's no additional clothing, no fishnets, anything like that. They're cheaping out on the base, they're cheaping out on the stand. So what else can be missing here, right? What are we overlooking? There's the box. Yoshitoku, the box I showed you, was just a cardboard box, so they're going the full recycled route. NEX does have to produce a slightly more elaborate box, and they use the plastic clamshells to house them, so you have some costs there. But they're also used to scaling that up. FuRyu knows how to handle those quantities. Maybe there's some marketing we're missing here. Maybe it cost a fortune to market these. But that's the same for any expensive figure in Japan. We just don't see that over here in the West, but every expensive figure is marketed and pushed in Japan, such as the Shibuya Scramble series. And even the figures that we see on AmiAmi, their prices include the cost of marketing, right, and the design work and everything that went into it. And they're still profitable, albeit at higher quantities, in the 30,000 yen range for 1/4 scales. So one of the only things I can think of that maybe we're missing that we're not going to be privy to is maybe there's a licensing deal here going on. Maybe in order to use Yoshitoku's name and collaborate with them, maybe they're charging FuRyu some insane licensing, right, cost to work with them. However, if I was a betting man, I would say that's not the case, and here's why. Now, we're getting into the realm of pure speculation here, so don't present any of this as fact if you go outside of this discussion. I say this because no matter how prestigious Yoshitoku is, they're the smaller company. By Yoshitoku's own admission, although we don't fully know the breadth of this, has a capital of 100 million yen. And as of 2022, have 121 employees and have 14 stores. FuRyu is a publicly traded company and has a capitalization of 35 billion yen and over 500 employees. The scale and the reach between these two are completely different. And the reason I say that Yoshitoku isn't charging FuRyu out the ass is because it's a mutually beneficial relationship. At the most basic, Yoshitoku gets a large order and is done, right? It doesn't even matter if FuRyu sells this or not. They've already paid for the manufacturing costs, and they've already shipped however many units that they made. Going back to Hina dolls, if you even practice it, are maybe a twice in a lifetime purchase. It could be a wedding gift that you've given to somebody, or if they have the birth of a daughter, you might buy them a Hina doll set. But beyond that, there's not much return unless you just happen to be a collector. Partnering with FuRyu brings the Yoshitoku name into a more global audience, a younger audience, and a similar audience, right? Collectors of Hina dolls aren't too dissimilar from collectors of anime figures. So this collab really is advertising for Yoshitoku. Not only do they get a bulk order, they're getting their name marketed across the world and into other people's homes. We would not know of Yoshitoku without this collaboration. And if this collaboration is a success, it just means even more bulk orders for Yoshitoku to fulfill and more advertisement. And because of that, I don't think there's some crazy deal going on when these two approach to do the collaboration, even if FuRyu was the one approaching Yoshitoku. Both companies also know how to handle IPs and those licensing relationships because they do it all the time. Yoshitoku does their own, like with Star Wars, but albeit they're producing their own lineup of stuff. And then FuRyu does it all the time for all of the characters and such they have to get, right? They have to get those IPs. So both companies are used to licensing between different brands. From there, to try to give FuRyu more benefit of the doubt, maybe there's some kind of, I don't know, per unit royalty or something that Yoshitoku is charging them that adds to that production cost that we're not seeing or privy to. Or maybe there's some kind of exclusivity agreement where Yoshitoku can't partner with someone else and that's costing FuRyu a ton of money. But at this point, this discussion just starts falling apart, right? It's all speculation. It's all stuff we're not going to be privy to. So let's just move on from there. At this point, all I know and all I can really say is this. A 30,000 yen PVC figure plus a 40,000 yen Japanese doll does not equal a 170,000 yen Japanese doll of lesser quality than both the 1/4 and the Oyama doll. Seeing this, and particularly being around this here, I would assert that Kurumi's value should only be around 70,000 yen. But 70,000 yen does sound cheap. And during our review, we did give Kurumi a slightly higher subjective score because she is a luxury item and she looks and feels like a luxury item. But so too is this. What we haven't been able to see before is that even though these are elaborate and complex, they're not that expensive, right? And when I say that expensive, I mean relative to this 140,000 yen kimono here that we're trying to assign a value to. This 40,000 yen kimono here is far more elaborate than this 140,000 yen kimono we're seeing here. What I think we're seeing here is something simple, and it's a marketing strategy by FuRyu, and they're intentionally price gouging us on this item here. They're doing so because FuRyu is trying to make anime figures an even greater luxury than it already is. And by positioning something at this 170,000 yen price mark, hell, the new ones are in the 200,000 yen mark, we're going to get more accustomed to seeing other figures increase in price. And we can see that with how they're trying to market their current like 1/7 and 1/6 scales in the 40,000 yen range. Like FuRyu's prices at the moment are absolutely insane. Just like we're getting used to Eastream's prices creeping up from 30,000 yen now to 40, 50, and even 60,000 yen for those figures. And worse, they can use Yoshitoku's prestigious name to sell us on the fact that this kimono we should perceive as being worth 140,000 yen, even though it's nowhere near as elaborate as Yoshitoku's own Oyama doll that cost 40,000 yen in its entirety. And if nothing else we've discussed so far has convinced you of this artificial price hike we're seeing, let's take a look at the current sales price of Kurumi. You see, Kurumi released 6 months ago. She's still in stock, and she's already discounted on sale for 33,000 yen off, which equates to a 22% discount. And if that's not enough, Tokyo Takumo did their own sale. Now theirs is priced in USD, where they priced Kurumi down to 1,165 USD, but with $757 cash back. If we look at other Yoshitoku collabs, we can look at the Toru, which is still in stock on AmiAmi, and is currently on sale for 47,000 yen off, which is a 35% reduction in cost. There is a lot of headroom to throw these things on sale already as is. And that's what I mean by there's a lot of headroom in this price for profit, because this is definitely artificially inflated well beyond a typical profit margin you would expect for a figure. And I would assert that 70,000 yen would still be a profitable price for FuRyu and is more in line with their traditional markups. So ultimately, my conclusion is this, and this is what I want you to take more than anything from this video. Yoshitoku is not the direct reason why these are so expensive. Yoshitoku can make awe-inspiring Oyama dolls, just like Oyama here, and be profitable, made to order for 40,000 yen. If these collabs are expensive, it's solely due to FuRyu positioning them in the market as such to create a new tier of figure. Investigating this has given me a newfound respect for Yoshitoku. Everything from shopping at their main store to their employees to the quality to what they had offered was mind-blowing. And in comparison, I definitely respect FuRyu a lot less. So where do we even go from here? What would I like to see from this? For starters, at minimum, FuRyu needs to give us the entire Yoshitoku experience. And what I mean by that is we need the base and we need that sign. Can we at least get rid of this cheap plastic base and that plastic sign? We need to elevate this to the quality that Yoshitoku can deliver. And of course, would love to see the price decrease. I think the sales prices that we're seeing are at least more reasonable, and when that price goes on sale, we get much closer to that perceived value that we're seeing here. Asking FuRyu to bring this down to 70 to 80,000 yen, unfortunately, of course, is just not going to happen and isn't realistic. The dream would be for people to see this and basically stop purchasing these at full retail price, right? If more people refuse to buy it at that price, if they choose to continue that series, we'll reduce the price over time. It's that simple, supply and demand. And this puts me in a really odd situation because as a figure collector, I don't want to pay full price for any of these. But disclosure, I want to buy Pecora, Miku, and Sonoko. These are on my radar right now. As a collector, personally, I'm transitioning to not buying as many like smaller scale figures. I'd like to buy fewer figures, but those of a higher tier. I am in love with these collabs. Like I still like it. I just loathe the price associated with them. But Kurumi here is still my favorite figure in the collection, even given the ridiculous price point. And moving forward, I want to buy them at least at the sale price. For Sonoko, prior to this video, I'd already committed to not pre-ordering her at all. She is still available, and because she's still available, I'm not too worried about it. You see, Kurumi never sold out, and she is still available and still around. Miku also hasn't sold out once, and she's still available for pre-order. And I'm going to cancel my pre-order for her and just get her whenever she goes on sale. I'm going to take those risks now because I can't justify spending 200,000 yen for those figures, even though, I aspire to own them. It just doesn't make any sense, especially with this in the collection now. But Pecora puts me in a hard place because Pecora did sell out briefly. And although she's available again, given her current popularity, I don't know, right? And the worst part is as a collector, I would wait. But as a content creator, I'm gonna buy her at full price. Because as a content creator, we wanna be one of the first to review her. And that price, right, is worth it to us to get that content out. So don't crucify me yet, right? Like, this is as a content creator, not a collector. The content creator position is different. I want to be able to bring that to you all in a time frame where she's still pertinent, right? Where she's still popular and people are interested in that figure. And that's what's going to make it worth buying that figure at full price so we can get it. There's also a sentimental value there, right? Because we went to Wonderfest and I've seen Pecora in person. I've seen her in a 1/1 scale and the 1/4 scale. And to me, I need to collect her to wrap up that whole story, right? We saw her at Wonderfest when she was coming out and being teased, and now we finally own her. So I want to complete that saga, and it's worth it to me to make sure I don't miss her if she just happens to sell out. But the full disclosure is that I don't think she will, because she's no longer sold out. I think it's going to be this exact same thing we see here at Kurumi. Collectors are not paying the crazy prices we've been seeing. We see this with the 44,000 yen bunnies that are immediately dropping back down to like the 32,000 yen range. And people aren't buying Kurumi, right? I paid full price for her because I thought she was going to sell out. She didn't. Toru still exists. In fact, she sold out briefly, but now she's back in stock apparently. So they must be getting stock from somewhere. And I think it's going to be that exact same way because Pecora is 200,000 yen. Same with Miku, same with Sonoko. But I just know they're trying to price these at the 200,000 yen mark to give them that perceived value. Now, I don't want to speculate on, the theoretical worth of Pecora and Miku, even though I have seen them in person. I haven't been up close with them to analyze the details and look at them. But to say they're 130,000 yen more than the 70,000 price point that I see here, yeah, I highly doubt it. My advice to any of you that like this lineup and want to buy it, it's this. It's not worth the MSRP, and it's not worth the sales price. But if the sales price is the only discount we're going to get, try to get it for the sales price. And if FuRyu sees that everyone is buying at the sales price, but not regular MSRP, eventually they might lower their expectations and bring this down to be significantly more affordable than what it is now. In a dream world, putting out a video like this could affect the market, right? It would affect enough people buying these to be like, wait, hold on, let's just not do it. And then it causes FuRyu to make adjustments, or at minimum, make it better. Give us the base that we see here. Give us the full Yoshitoku treatment and still charge us the same price, which is what FuRyu is going to do, but at least we get a little more out of it. There's not 170,000 yen worth in this figure. Even at the sale price of 130,000 yen, it's not in that figure. I can't see more than 70,000 yen. I really hope you enjoyed this video. This has been a dream of mine to do ever since doing the Kurumi review. I love to give details and to assign value to something, and it would be nice to know, is this worth it? Is it not worth it? And the only way to do that was to buy one of these dolls. But I didn't think that ever really happened because it seemed like maybe I could order it online or try to do it via proxy. But when we actually went back to Japan, which was, not planned originally, and we were able to make all these pieces fall into place with my little sister helping me purchase this, and that way I can bring it over here to do this for you all. It really was a dream come true. This kind of content is so much fun to do. It's incredibly humbling to be in a scene that's still growing. It's crazy to me that, the top people that only do figure content reviews are still really small in the grand scheme of things. And that we can come in as new aspiring content creators and put out information that's not there. That's awesome. We can put out detailed figure reviews that aren't there. And it's wonderful because it takes away any of that sense of competition, right? We're just putting out content that we want to see, that we think you all will see, that we enjoy producing, and that freedom has been a lot of fun. I hope that there are more opportunities to present information like this or to find other discussions like this on our collecting journey, and I hope I can bring more of things like this to you all. Now that we've done this, these dolls are going to forever get a 1 on our value scale and even our subjective value scale until FuRyu decides to stop this nonsense with pricing. And we owe that to owning Oyami here. Without comparing this, we can't make any knowledgeable assertions, right, of value. But now we know what Yoshitoku is capable of, and FuRyu is trying to milk it for all it's worth. Anyways, I'm waffling at this point. Thank you so much for all the support that you've given us. At the time of this video, we'll be nearing 2,000 subscribers. If we hit that mark in early February, we'll have seen 122% growth in subscribers over our first year. And that support means literally everything, right? Your comments mean the world to us, and I'm not, that is not an overstatement. We look forward to all the comments we receive. We have people that comment very readily on our videos. We literally can't wait to be, oh, what is this person gonna say? I can't wait for their response. It really is the fuel that it takes to keep us motivated to do all this. I've been collecting for 11 years, but I've only been on the social media scene for 2. That's not a long time, and it just feels so great to, not that I was closeted about this passion, right, but to actually be able to share and talk to you all. Any of you that communicate back and forth, it feels like we're communicating with friends, and it means the world, and it makes the world just a little smaller. And with that, am I just being dense? Am I missing something here? Is there some variable that I've just completely forgotten and am blind to? Let me know in the comments below what you think. Is this worth 70,000 yen to you? Is that still too much? Do you think I'm off base and this is worth 170,000 yen? Let me know. I'd love to know your opinions. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe. I'm Senpai. Take care.